Dune. Part 2 is one of the biggest science fiction films ever made, directed by Denis Villeneuve and based on the legendary novel written by Frank Herbert. With a massive budget of around $190 million, the movie continues the epic story that began in Dune 2021. The film stars Timothée Chalamet, Zendaya, Rebecca Ferguson, Austin Butler, and Josh Brolin. This story takes us back to the dangerous desert world of Arrakis, where power, prophecy, revenge, and survival collide in a battle that could decide the future of the entire universe. If you enjoy epic movie stories explained in a cinematic way, make sure to follow Signora, drop a like, and comment your favorite movie for the next explanation. The story begins right after the events of the first film. The desert winds sweep across the endless sands of Arrakis, a brutal planet where survival itself is a challenge. After the destruction of House Atreides, Paul Atreides and his mother, Lady Jessica, are now living among the mysterious desert warriors known as the Fremen. These people have survived on Arrakis for generations, adapting to the deadly environment and learning to ride the giant sandworms that roam beneath the sand. At the center of all this is Paul, a young man who has already seen terrifying visions of the future. His dreams show war spreading across the galaxy in his name, a future where countless lives could be lost because of him. But Paul is not just any ordinary survivor. The Fremen believe he might be the chosen one from an ancient prophecy, a leader who will guide them to freedom and transform Arrakis forever. However, not everyone among the Fremen believes in this prophecy. Some see Paul as an outsider, a boy from another world who cannot possibly understand their harsh way of life. Among those who watch him closely is Chani, a skilled and fearless Fremen warrior. She is curious about Paul but also skeptical. She believes the Fremen must control their own destiny rather than depend on legends created by outsiders. Paul quickly realizes that if he wants to survive here, he must truly become one of them. The desert does not forgive weakness. Every step in the open sand could attract a giant sandworm, creatures so massive that they can swallow entire machines. Even water is more valuable than gold on this planet, and every Freeman learns from childhood that wasting water is the greatest crime. To prove himself, Paul begins learning the Freeman way of life. He trains with them, fights with them, and studies their traditions. The Fremen warriors are some of the most dangerous fighters in the universe because they have spent their entire lives battling both the desert and powerful enemies. But far away from the desert tribes, the enemy is still watching. The cruel House Harkonnen, responsible for destroying Paul's family, still controls Arrakis and its most valuable resource, the spice known as melange. This mysterious substance allows space travel and gives powerful visions of the future. Whoever controls the spice controls the fate of the galaxy. Leading the Harkonnen forces is the monstrous Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, a ruthless ruler who will do anything to maintain power. He believes Paul Atreides is dead, just like the rest of the Atreides family. But secretly he is preparing new plans to tighten his grip on Arrakis and crush any resistance that might rise from the desert. Meanwhile, Paul continues experiencing strange visions. Sometimes he sees a future where he becomes a hero who liberates the Fremen and destroys the Harkonnens, but other visions are far darker. In those, Paul sees himself leading a holy war that spreads across the stars, with billions of people dying in his name. This is the future that terrifies him the most. Paul understands something that others around him do not. Power can easily become destruction. If the Fremen truly believe he is their Messiah, their faith could unleash a war the universe has never seen before. Yet despite his fears, Paul also knows that hiding from destiny may not be possible. Every step he takes seems to pull him deeper into the path that prophecy has already prepared for him. During one of their journeys across the desert, Paul and Chani begin to grow closer. She starts to see that Paul is different from the other outsiders who have come to exploit Arrakis. Instead of trying to dominate the desert, Paul respects it. He listens, learns, and slowly earns the trust of the Fremen fighters. But trust must still be proven. One night, Paul is challenged to demonstrate that he truly belongs among them. The Fremen warriors gather under the cold desert sky as Paul prepares to take part in one of their most dangerous rituals, riding a sandworm. These massive creatures, known as Shai-Hulud by the Fremen, are the true rulers of the desert. Controlling one requires incredible courage and perfect timing. One mistake could mean instant death. As the ground begins to shake, a colossal sandworm rises from the dunes like a living mountain. The creature's enormous mouth opens, revealing rows of endless teeth as it moves beneath the sand with unstoppable force. The Fremen watch silently. This moment will decide whether Paul is truly worthy of their respect or just another outsider who will perish in the desert. Paul steps forward, staring at the giant creature as it approaches. The future of Arrakis may begin with this single moment. The desert wind howls across the endless dunes of Arrakis, as every warrior of the Fremen watches closely. In front of them stands Paul Atreides, ready to attempt one of the most dangerous acts any Fremen can perform, riding a giant sandworm. These creatures, known as Shai-Hulud, are not just monsters of the desert. To the Fremen, they are sacred beings, symbols of the planet itself. Only the bravest warriors can control them, and even they risk death every time they try. The ground begins to shake violently as the massive worm approaches. The sand ripples like water as the gigantic creature moves beneath the surface. Suddenly the worm bursts upward, towering above the desert like a living mountain. Its enormous circular mouth opens, filled with thousands of razor-sharp teeth. But Paul does not run. Instead, he stands firm and prepares exactly as the Freeman taught him. At the perfect moment, he hooks a special tool called a maker hook into the worm's scales. The creature reacts instantly, twisting and rising higher as Paul climbs onto its massive body. For a moment it seems impossible, but then something incredible happens. Paul successfully balances himself on the giant sandworm, guiding it across the desert exactly like a true Freeman warrior. The massive creature begins moving across the dunes with Paul standing on top of it, controlling its direction. The Freemen watch in shock. This is something very few outsiders could ever accomplish. Even among the Freemen, riding a worm this skillfully takes years of training. Yet Paul has done it far faster than anyone expected. When the worm finally slows and disappears back beneath the sand, the warriors look at Paul with new respect. Some of them begin to believe even more strongly that he might truly be the one spoken of in their ancient prophecy. Among the crowd, Chani watches silently. She cannot deny what she just saw. Paul is clearly special, but she still fears the power of prophecy. Too many times in history, outsiders have used religion to control the Fremen. Despite the growing belief among the tribes, Chani continues reminding everyone that Paul is still human, not a god. Meanwhile, far away in the dark fortress of the Harkonnens, a new threat begins to rise. The terrifying ruler Baron Vladimir Harkonnen has grown impatient. The spice production on Arrakis is not meeting his expectations, and he wants someone even more brutal to control the planet. To solve this problem, the Baron introduces a new weapon, his ruthless nephew Feyd-Rautha Harkonnen. Unlike the Baron's other soldiers, Feyd-Rautha is intelligent, charismatic, and extremely dangerous. He enjoys fighting and killing, treating combat like entertainment. In the Harkonnen arenas, he battles opponents in deadly gladiator matches, proving his strength and gaining the loyalty of the people. One of these brutal battles becomes a massive public spectacle. Thousands of spectators gather to watch Feyd-Rautha fight multiple prisoners at once. The arena is filled with cheering crowds as the prisoners are forced to attack him. But the fight is never fair. Feyd-Rautha moves like a predator, striking with speed and precision. One by one his opponents fall until the arena floor is covered with bodies. The crowd erupts in celebration as he stands victorious. Watching from above, the Baron smiles. He knows Feyd-Rautha could become the perfect ruler for Arrakis, someone cruel enough to crush any rebellion and intelligent enough to maintain control of the spice. Back in the desert, Paul continues training with the Fremen. Every day he learns more about their tactics, their survival methods, and their deep connection with the planet. The Fremen are not just warriors, they are masters of desert warfare. They know how to move silently across dunes, hide from enemies, and strike without warning. Paul quickly becomes one of their strongest fighters. Under his leadership, the Fremen begin launching small but powerful attacks on Harkonnen spice operations. Using guerrilla tactics, they destroy spice harvesters, sabotage enemy equipment, and disappear into the desert before reinforcements arrive. These attacks slowly weaken Harkonnen control over Arrakis. But something else is also happening. With every victory, the legend of Paul grows stronger. Many Fremen begin calling him Muad'Dib, the name of a desert mouse known for surviving the harshest conditions. To them, Paul is becoming more than just a leader, he is becoming a symbol. This is exactly what Paul feared, because every time the Fremen celebrate his victories, his visions of the future become clearer. He sees massive armies spreading across the galaxy under his banner, entire planets burning, billions of people dying in a war fought in his name. Paul realizes that even if he tries to avoid this future, the belief of the Fremen might make it unavoidable. One evening, as Paul and Chani stand together on top of a high dune watching the sunset, the desert sky glows deep orange. The endless sea of sand stretches to the horizon. Chani tells Paul something important. She says the Fremen do not need a savior. What they truly need is freedom from those who exploit their planet. Paul understands her point, but he also knows the universe is already moving toward a massive conflict, and if that war is coming, he must be ready to face it. Because the enemies gathering against him are powerful, and soon they will realize that Paul Atreides is still alive. The legend of Paul Atreides begins spreading rapidly across the harsh deserts of Arrakis. What started as small survival battles has now turned into something much bigger. Every victory against the enemy strengthens the belief of the Fremen that Paul might truly be the one their ancient prophecies promised. Fremen warriors now travel across the desert telling stories about the outsider who rides sandworms and defeats powerful enemies. They call him Muad'Dib, a name that represents survival, intelligence, and leadership. Among the tribes, this name begins to carry almost mythical meaning. But while the Freemen grow more confident, Paul himself feels the weight of something far heavier. Every time he consumes the spice of Arrakis, his visions become stronger. The spice, also known as melange, enhances his mind and opens strange paths inside his consciousness. Through these visions, Paul can see possible futures, countless versions of events that may or may not happen. Some of these visions are hopeful. In those futures, Paul leads the Freemen to freedom and transforms Arrakis into a powerful world that no empire can control. The desert tribes become respected across the galaxy, no longer treated as primitive warriors. But other visions are terrifying. In them, Paul sees massive starships carrying Freeman armies across the universe. Entire planets burn as a religious war spreads in his name. Billions of people die because they believe Paul is a divine leader. This is the future Paul desperately wants to avoid. Yet the more the Fremen believe in him, the more that future becomes possible. Meanwhile, in the dark halls of power far from the desert, political forces continue moving. The emperor of the known universe, Padishah Emperor Shaddam IV, has been watching the situation on Arrakis carefully. The spice produced on this planet is the most valuable resource in the galaxy because it allows interstellar travel. Without spice, space navigation would collapse and entire civilizations would become isolated. Because of this, the Emperor cannot allow Arrakis to fall into chaos. He originally allowed the destruction of House Atreides because he feared their growing popularity and power. But now rumors have begun reaching the imperial court, rumors that Paul Atreides might still be alive. At first these whispers seem impossible. After all, the entire Atreides family was supposed to be destroyed by the brutal attack of the Harkonnens. But as reports of increasing Fremen attacks arrive, the Emperor begins to suspect that something unusual is happening on the desert planet. If Paul truly survived, it could become a serious threat to the balance of power in the galaxy. Back on Arrakis, Paul continues fighting alongside the Fremen. Their attacks against the spice operations grow larger and more organized. Instead of just destroying equipment, they begin capturing resources and turning them against the Harkonnen forces. Under Paul's leadership, the Fremen become even more effective than before. They use the desert itself as a weapon. Giant sandworms help them travel across enormous distances quickly. Hidden tunnels and caves allow them to move unseen beneath the dunes. Every time the Harkonnens try to respond, the Fremen disappear back into the desert. One particularly daring mission becomes legendary among the tribes. A massive spice harvester begins operating deep inside Fremen territory. Normally, these machines are heavily protected by armed soldiers and aircraft. Destroying one would send a powerful message to the Harkonnen rulers. Paul leads a carefully planned attack. As the harvester begins collecting spice, the Fremen strike suddenly from multiple directions. Explosions shake the desert while warriors emerge from the sand itself. The Harkonnen soldiers panic. Before they can organize their defenses, the Fremen sabotage the massive machine and escape on sandworms that rise from the desert like unstoppable giants. Within minutes, the enormous harvester is destroyed. This victory spreads across Arrakis like wildfire. For the Harkonnens it becomes a humiliating disaster. For the Fremen it becomes proof that their resistance is working. But the growing rebellion also attracts dangerous attention. In the Harkonnen stronghold, Feyd-Rautha Harkonnen begins preparing for his role in the conflict. Unlike his uncle, Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, Feyd-Rautha understands that controlling Arrakis requires more than fear. It requires strategy. He studies the reports about Fremen attacks carefully. The more he reads, the more he realizes that these raids are not random. Someone intelligent is guiding them. Someone who understands warfare. For Feyd-Rautha, this becomes an exciting challenge. He begins planning how to crush the Fremen resistance completely. His strategy is simple but ruthless. Find their hidden settlements, destroy their water supplies, and eliminate their leaders. If the Fremen lose their leaders, their rebellion will collapse. Meanwhile, Paul senses that a massive confrontation is approaching. His visions become clearer every day. The threads of the future seem to be pulling everything toward a single moment, a moment when the fate of Arrakis will finally be decided. But before that battle arrives, Paul must face one more step in his transformation. The Fremen leaders want him to prove his destiny completely. They believe that only someone chosen by fate could survive the sacred ritual involving the most powerful form of spice on the planet, a ritual that no ordinary human could survive. And if Paul succeeds, the Fremen will no longer see him as just a leader. They will see him as their true Messiah. The resistance across Arrakis continues growing stronger. Under the leadership of Paul Atreides, the desert warriors of the Fremen are no longer just surviving. They are slowly turning into a powerful army capable of challenging the rulers of the planet. Every successful raid against the spice operations weakens the control of the Harkonnen forces. The spice, also called melange, is the most valuable substance in the universe because it allows space navigators to travel safely between the stars. Whoever controls the spice controls the entire galactic economy. Because of this, the Harkonnens cannot allow the Fremen rebellion to continue. But the situation on Arrakis is becoming far more complicated than they expected. Across the desert, stories about Paul continue spreading. Many Fremen now believe completely that he is the one promised in their ancient legends, the leader who will bring freedom to their people and change the future of their world. Some of the older Fremen leaders strongly support this belief. They have waited generations for the arrival of someone like Paul, but others remain cautious. Among those who question the prophecy the most is Chani. She respects Paul and has grown close to him during their time fighting together, but she does not like how the tribes are starting to worship him. To her, Paul is still a human being, not a divine figure. One evening, while sitting near a hidden Fremen camp deep inside the desert caves, Chani speaks honestly with Paul. She warns him that blind faith can be dangerous. If the Fremen believe he is a Messiah, they might follow him into wars that will destroy entire civilizations. Paul listens carefully, because the truth is he has already seen those wars in his visions. Through the strange power of spice, Paul's mind continues opening further into possible futures. The more spice he consumes, the clearer his visions become. Sometimes these visions show him small events, battles, conversations, and decisions that might shape the future. But other visions are far more terrifying. In those futures, Paul sees a massive religious crusade spreading across the galaxy. Freeman armies travel to distant planets, conquering worlds in his name. Entire populations are forced to follow his rule. Billions of lives are lost. Paul understands that if he fully accepts the role of the prophesied leader, that future might become real. But if he refuses, the Harkonnens may continue oppressing the Freemen forever. This impossible choice weighs heavily on him. Meanwhile, inside the dark industrial cities controlled by the enemy, new plans are forming. The brutal noble family ruling Arrakis, led by Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, is preparing to introduce a new leader to crush the rebellion once and for all. That leader is the Baron's dangerous nephew, Feyd-Rautha Harkonnen. Feyd-Rautha is everything the Baron wants in a ruler: fearless, intelligent, and completely ruthless. Unlike other Harkonnen commanders who rely only on brute force, Feyd-Rautha enjoys studying his enemies and understanding their weaknesses. When he reviews the reports about the Fremen attacks, he immediately notices something unusual. These attacks are too well organized. The Fremen were always strong fighters, but now they are acting like a trained army. Their raids are strategic, their timing is perfect, and their leaders seem to understand advanced military tactics. To Feyd-Rautha, this means one thing: someone is guiding them, and if that leader is discovered and eliminated, the rebellion could collapse instantly. Back in the desert, Paul continues building stronger alliances among the different Fremen tribes. Many tribes that once operated independently are now beginning to unite under a common cause. For the first time in generations, the Fremen are becoming a single powerful force. One of the tribe's spiritual leaders, Stilgar, believes this is exactly what the prophecy predicted. He has become one of Paul's strongest supporters and encourages the tribes to follow him completely. But before the tribes can fully accept Paul as their ultimate leader, there is still one final spiritual test. This test involves the most powerful and dangerous substance on Arrakis, a concentrated form of spice known as the Water of Life. The ritual connected to this substance is sacred among the Freemen. Only the tribe's most powerful spiritual women, known as Reverend Mothers, can survive drinking it. For anyone else, the liquid is deadly poison. Yet according to prophecy, the chosen leader may have the ability to survive it. If Paul can survive the Water of Life, it would prove to many Fremen that he truly is the one destined to lead them. But the risk is enormous. No man has ever survived the ritual before. And if Paul attempts it and fails, the rebellion could lose its most important leader in a single moment. As the night grows darker across the endless desert, the tribes begin preparing for the ritual that could decide Paul's fate. Because if he survives, he will no longer be seen as just a warrior. He will become something far more powerful in the eyes of the Fremen. The desert night on Arrakis is silent and cold as the Fremen prepare for one of their most sacred rituals. Deep inside a hidden cave, surrounded by ancient carvings and dim torchlight, the tribe gathers to witness something that has never happened before. At the center of the chamber stands Paul Atreides. This moment will decide his destiny. For generations, the Fremen have followed a powerful spiritual tradition connected to a substance called the water of life. This liquid is created through a dangerous process involving the giant sandworms of Arrakis. In its raw form, the liquid is extremely poisonous. Only the tribe's spiritual leaders, known as Reverend Mothers, are trained to survive its effects. Even for them, the ritual is extremely risky. But according to ancient prophecy, a chosen leader might have the ability to survive the water of life and gain incredible awareness of the future. Many Freemen believe Paul could be that person. However, not everyone supports this decision. Some warriors worry that attempting the ritual could kill him instantly. If that happens, the rebellion against the Harkonnens could collapse before it even reaches its full strength. Among those watching anxiously is Chani. She stands quietly among the crowd, her expression filled with concern. Over time she has grown close to Paul, fighting beside him in battles and learning about the strange visions that guide him. Unlike some of the others, Chani does not want Paul to become a religious figure. She simply wants him to survive. But Paul knows that the future of Arrakis may depend on what happens tonight. His visions have shown him that the war coming to this planet will be massive. The Harkonnens will not give up control of the spice easily, and if Paul truly wants to defeat them, he may need the power that the water of life can unlock. Standing beside him is the respected Freeman leader Stilgar, one of Paul's strongest supporters. Stilgar believes the prophecy has already been proven through Paul's actions riding sandworms, leading successful raids, and earning the loyalty of multiple tribes. To Stilgar, this ritual is simply the final confirmation, but Paul understands something that most of the Fremen do not. The prophecy itself may have been manipulated long ago by powerful religious organizations to control distant populations. If that is true, then the belief surrounding him might not be destiny at all. It might be a carefully planted myth. Despite this doubt, Paul also knows that refusing the ritual now could destroy the unity he has built among the tribes. And unity is exactly what the Fremen need if they are going to defeat their enemies. Finally, the moment arrives. The water of life is brought forward in a ceremonial container. The liquid inside glows faintly in the dim cave light, its surface almost hypnotic. Every warrior watches in complete silence. Paul takes the container and looks at the strange liquid. He knows that drinking it could kill him within seconds, but he also knows that surviving it could unlock the full power of his visions. Without hesitation, Paul drinks. At first, nothing seems to happen. Then suddenly his body begins reacting violently. The poison spreads through his system, causing intense pain as his mind is flooded with overwhelming images. Paul collapses to the ground while the Freemen watch in shock. Chani rushes forward, terrified. For a moment it looks as though Paul has died. His body lies completely still, and the cave becomes filled with worried whispers. Some warriors begin to fear that the prophecy has failed. But deep inside Paul's mind, something extraordinary is happening. The water of life is unlocking a level of awareness no human has ever experienced before. Paul begins seeing countless timelines at once. Every possible future unfolds before him. Wars, alliances, betrayals, and victories across the entire universe. He sees the rise and fall of empires. He sees billions of lives affected by his choices. And most importantly, he begins understanding which path could lead to the survival of the Fremen people. When Paul finally opens his eyes again, the entire cave falls silent. The poison that should have killed him has somehow been transformed inside his body. He has survived. The Fremen stare at him with awe. For many of them, this moment confirms everything they believed. Surviving the water of life proves that Paul is not just a warrior or a leader. To them, he is now the true Messiah of Arrakis. But as Paul slowly rises to his feet, his expression is far more serious than anyone expected. Because now that he has seen the future more clearly than ever before, he understands something terrifying. The war for Arrakis is about to become far bigger than anyone imagined. After surviving the deadly ritual, Paul Atreides is no longer the same man. Inside the hidden caves of the Fremen, the warriors stare at him with complete silence. What they have just witnessed should have been impossible. No man has ever survived the sacred water of life before, but Paul did. And because of this, many Fremen now believe without any doubt that he is the one promised in their ancient prophecy. The moment Paul stands up again, the atmosphere in the cave completely changes. The warriors who once saw him as a talented outsider now look at him with deep reverence. Some even kneel before him. To them, this is the final proof. Paul is Muad'Dib. But inside Paul's mind, the situation is far more complicated. The water of life has expanded his consciousness beyond anything a normal human could experience. His visions are no longer brief flashes of possible futures. Now he can see entire timelines unfolding before him. He sees countless paths the universe might take depending on the decisions he makes. Some of those futures bring freedom to the desert planet Arrakis and finally end the brutal rule of the Harkonnens. But many other futures are terrifying. In those visions, Paul sees massive starships filled with Fremen warriors spreading across the galaxy. Entire planets fall under their control as a holy war spreads in his name. Billions of people die because they believe he is a divine leader chosen by destiny. This is the future Paul has always feared. But now he understands something even more frightening. Avoiding that future might no longer be possible, because the belief of the Freeman is becoming stronger every day. Their faith in him is growing into a powerful force that could reshape the universe. As the warriors celebrate his survival, Paul begins to realize that he must carefully guide this belief rather than fight against it. Otherwise, it could grow out of control. Standing beside him is the respected Fremen leader Stilgar, who is overwhelmed with emotion. For Stilgar, Paul's survival confirms everything he has believed since the beginning. He proudly declares that the prophecy has come true. The Fremen warriors cheer loudly as the news spreads across the underground settlement. Messengers quickly leave the cave to inform other tribes that their long-awaited leader has risen. Across the desert, the legend of Paul grows even stronger. But not everyone reacts with the same excitement. Nearby, Chani watches the celebration quietly. Although she is relieved that Paul survived, she is worried about what this moment means. She understands how dangerous blind faith can become. When people start believing someone is a divine savior, they stop questioning their actions, and that kind of power can easily lead to destruction. Later, when the celebrations calm down, Chani speaks privately with Paul. She asks him what he saw during the ritual. For a moment, Paul struggles to explain, because what he experienced is beyond normal human understanding. He tells her that he saw countless futures, many of them filled with war and suffering. Chani listens carefully. Then she asks the most important question. Can you stop it? Paul looks out across the endless dunes of Arrakis before answering. He explains that every future he has seen contains conflict in some form. The Harkonnens will never willingly give up control of the planet and its spice. The Emperor of the Galaxy will also protect the spice at any cost. War is coming. The only question is how large it will become. While Paul is gaining power among the Fremen, the enemy is also preparing their next move. Inside the dark fortress controlled by the Harkonnens, the brutal noble baron Vladimir Harkonnen grows increasingly angry about the continued attacks on spice operations. His patience is running out, so he finally decides to give full control of Arrakis to his dangerous nephew Feyd-Rautha Harkonnen. Unlike many Harkonnen commanders, Feyd-Rautha enjoys complex challenges. He studies the reports about the Fremen rebellion carefully and quickly realizes something important. These attacks are too organized to be random. Someone is leading them, and whoever that leader is must be extremely intelligent. For Feyd-Rautha, defeating such an opponent would be the ultimate victory. He begins preparing a ruthless plan to crush the Fremen completely. His strategy involves launching massive military operations across the desert, destroying hidden settlements, and cutting off the Fremen water supplies. Without water, no one can survive on Arrakis. Back in the desert, Paul senses that the final stage of the conflict is approaching. With his expanded vision of the future, he now understands that small attacks and guerrilla raids will not be enough anymore. If the Fremen truly want freedom, they must prepare for a massive war. A war that could decide the fate of the entire galaxy. As Paul looks across the endless desert horizon, he realizes that the time for hiding in the shadows is almost over. Soon the universe will learn that Paul Atreides is alive, and he is ready to claim Arrakis. After surviving the deadly ritual of the Water of Life, Paul Atreides is no longer just a skilled fighter among the Fremen. Across the vast deserts of Arrakis, his name is now spreading like a legend. Many tribes now fully believe that Paul is the prophesied leader who will guide them to freedom. The title Muad'Dib is no longer just a nickname, it has become a symbol of hope for the Fremen people who have suffered under the rule of outsiders for generations. But Paul understands that belief alone will not defeat their enemies. The Harkonnens still control most of the major cities and the powerful spice harvesting operations. As long as they control the spice, they control the wealth and power of Arrakis. If the Fremen truly want freedom, they must challenge the enemy directly. With his expanded visions of the future, Paul now sees possible strategies that could lead to victory. Instead of just launching small attacks, he begins organizing the scattered Fremen tribes into a unified army. For the first time in history, the different tribes begin working together as a single powerful force. The experienced warrior Stilgar helps Paul coordinate the tribes. Stilgar has spent his entire life fighting the harsh desert and understands the strengths of the Fremen better than anyone. Together they begin planning a large-scale campaign against the Harkonnen forces. Meanwhile, the Fremen warriors continue improving their combat tactics. They use sandworms as transportation across the desert, allowing them to move enormous distances quickly without being detected by enemy patrols. Each warrior trains relentlessly, preparing for the day when they will finally challenge the rulers of Arrakis. But while the Fremen prepare for war, something else is also changing. The spiritual belief surrounding Paul continues growing stronger. More and more tribes begin treating him as a messiah rather than just a military leader. Songs and stories about his survival of the water of life spread across the desert. This growing devotion worries Chani. Although she loves Paul and trusts him, she fears what might happen if the Fremen stop seeing him as a human being. When people believe their leader is divine, they may follow him blindly into destruction. One evening, Chani confronts Paul about this. Standing on a high dune while the sun sets over Arrakis, she asks him if he truly wants to become the religious leader the tribes believe he is. Paul hesitates before answering. He explains that after drinking the water of life, he saw countless possible futures. In many of them, the Fremen become unstoppable warriors spreading across the galaxy in his name. Entire planets burn during a massive holy war. Paul admits that he never wanted that future, but now he also understands something else. Without fully embracing his role as the Fremen leader, they might never unite strongly enough to defeat the Harkonnens. This terrible choice leaves Paul trapped between two dangerous futures. Either he accepts the power of the prophecy and risks creating a galaxy-wide war, or he refuses it and allows the oppression of the Fremen to continue. While Paul struggles with this decision, the enemy is preparing a powerful response. Inside the industrial cities controlled by the Harkonnens, the brutal noble Baron Vladimir Harkonnen has officially given control of Arrakis to his deadly nephew Feyd-Rautha Harkonnen. Feyd-Rautha is determined to prove himself as a worthy ruler. Unlike his uncle, he does not rely only on fear and brutality. Instead, he carefully studies the Fremen tactics and begins preparing a strategic counterattack. He realizes that simply hunting Fremen warriors across the desert will not work. The desert is their home and they know how to survive in ways outsiders cannot. So Feyd-Rautha develops a new plan. Instead of chasing the Fremen across the dunes, he will attack their hidden settlements and destroy their most valuable resource, water. Without water, even the toughest desert warriors cannot survive. He orders large military patrols to search the desert for hidden caves and underground reservoirs where the Fremen store their precious water supplies. If these locations are discovered, entire tribes could be wiped out. Back in the desert, Paul senses that the enemy is becoming more dangerous. His visions show him glimpses of upcoming battles, massive explosions, and armies clashing across the sands of Arrakis. The final confrontation between the Fremen and the Harkonnens is getting closer every day. Knowing this, Paul begins preparing the tribes for something they have never attempted before: a full-scale war. He gathers the leaders of multiple Fremen tribes inside a massive underground chamber. Warriors from distant regions travel for days across the desert to attend the meeting. For the first time, nearly all Fremen tribes are represented in one place. Standing before them, Paul explains that the time has come to stop hiding. The enemy believes the Fremen are just scattered desert fighters. Soon they will discover the truth. The Fremen are about to become the most powerful army Arrakis has ever seen. And when they rise together, the rulers of the planet will finally understand that the desert itself has chosen its champions. The winds of war begin sweeping across the endless dunes of Arrakis. What once looked like scattered attacks by desert fighters is now transforming into a full-scale rebellion. Under the leadership of Paul Atreides, the warriors of the Fremen are preparing for the biggest battle in their history. For generations, the Fremen have survived by hiding deep within the desert, avoiding the powerful forces that controlled Arrakis. But now the situation is changing. Paul has united tribes that once lived separately. Thousands of warriors are now ready to fight together. Inside massive underground chambers hidden beneath the desert, tribal leaders gather to plan their next move. The respected leader Stilgar stands beside Paul as they explain the strategy to the assembled warriors. Their goal is no longer just survival. Their goal is complete control of Arrakis. Paul explains that the Harkonnens still control the major cities and the spice production centers. As long as they control the spice, they control the wealth and power of the entire planet. So the Fremen must strike where it hurts the most. They will attack the spice operations on a massive scale. The plan is bold and extremely dangerous. Multiple Fremen armies will move across the desert at the same time, riding giant sandworms to travel quickly across enormous distances. When the signal is given, they will launch simultaneous attacks on Harkonnen spice facilities. If these attacks succeed, the enemy's control over Arrakis could collapse. But Paul also knows the enemy is becoming smarter. Inside the heavily fortified Harkonnen capital, Feyd Rautha Harkonnen has taken control of the planet's military operations. Unlike many commanders before him, Feyd Rautha studies every report about the Fremen carefully. He realizes that the desert fighters are no longer acting randomly. Someone brilliant is guiding them, and Feyd-Rautha is determined to find that person. Meanwhile, the ruthless ruler Baron Vladimir Harkonnen continues demanding results. Spice production must increase and the rebellion must be destroyed. To the Baron, the Fremen are nothing more than a nuisance. But Feyd-Rautha understands they are becoming something much more dangerous. He begins preparing a massive military response. Large patrols are sent into the desert searching for hidden Fremen settlements. Aircraft scan the dunes while soldiers attempt to locate underground caves where the tribes store their water supplies. If those water reserves are destroyed, entire tribes could die within days. Back among the Fremen, the warriors continue preparing for war. Training becomes even more intense. Fighters practice desert combat, sandworm riding, and coordinated attacks. Every warrior understands that the coming battles could decide the fate of their people forever. But while the Fremen prepare physically, Paul faces another challenge: controlling the growing belief that he is their Messiah. Many tribes now see him as a divine leader chosen by destiny. Songs about Muad'Dib spread across the desert. This worries Chani, who continues reminding Paul that the Fremen should fight for freedom, not because they believe in a prophecy. One night, as they stand together watching the stars above Arrakis, Chani asks Paul something important. She asks whether the prophecy is truly real, or if it was planted long ago by powerful groups trying to manipulate people. Paul admits the truth. Many ancient prophecies across the galaxy were carefully created by secret organizations to control distant populations. The legends surrounding the Fremen may have been designed to make them easier to influence. But now the belief has become real. Even if the prophecy began as manipulation, the Fremen believe in it with all their hearts. And belief itself is powerful enough to shape reality. Paul also explains that his visions of the future are becoming clearer every day. He sees the final battle approaching. He sees the Emperor himself arriving on Arrakis to deal with the rebellion personally. The ruler of the entire galaxy cannot allow spice production to collapse. If the spice stops flowing, interstellar travel will become impossible. So sooner or later the Emperor will come. Paul realizes that when that moment arrives, the war will reach its ultimate stage. If the Fremen defeat both the Harkonnens and the Emperor's forces, they could control the most valuable resource in the universe. But if they lose, the Fremen could be completely wiped out. Knowing this, Paul begins preparing the tribes for the final confrontation. He tells the warriors that their enemy believes the desert is empty and lifeless. Soon they will learn the truth. The desert is alive, and it is about to rise against those who tried to conquer it. The stage is set for the ultimate confrontation on Arrakis. Under the leadership of Paul Atreides, the united Fremen tribes are now ready to face their most dangerous enemies yet, the Harkonnens, led by the cunning Feyd Rautha Harkonnen and the Emperor of the Galaxy himself. This is no longer a battle for survival. It is a war to decide the fate of the entire universe. Paul's visions guide every move of the Fremen army. Each attack, each ambush, each strategic decision is calculated based on countless possible outcomes he has seen in his mind. Riding massive sandworms across the desert, the Fremen strike fear into the hearts of their enemies. They are no longer a scattered resistance, they are an unstoppable force. The Harkonnens, however, are not easily defeated. Feyd-Rautha studies the Fremen attacks carefully, adjusting his strategies and reinforcing the most vulnerable spice operations. He knows that the survival of his family and the control of Arrakis depends on crushing Paul's rebellion. Meanwhile, Paul's personal relationships continue to shape his decisions. Chani, who has been at his side through every battle, remains his most trusted confidant. She reminds him that even with overwhelming power, the human cost of war must never be forgotten. Every plan must balance strategy with morality, an idea many of the Fremen do not consider in their growing fervor. The first massive clash occurs near a key spice production facility. Thousands of Fremen descend from the dunes, riding on the backs of gigantic sandworms, surprising the Harkonnen forces. The battle is intense. Explosions shake the desert, machines are destroyed, and soldiers are captured. Paul's presence inspires his warriors, and their combined strength begins to overwhelm the enemy. But this victory comes at a cost. Despite careful planning, Fremen warriors are lost in the chaos. Paul watches the deaths of those who have fought beside him, understanding that even in victory there is sacrifice. His visions warn him that the greatest challenges are yet to come. As the news of the Fremen victory spreads, the Emperor decides that direct intervention is necessary. He dispatches elite Sardaukar troops, an elite military force feared throughout the galaxy, to Arrakis. Their arrival escalates the war, forcing Paul to confront not just the Harkonnens, but the full might of imperial power. Every decision becomes critical. One misstep could destroy everything he has worked to build. Paul's leadership now becomes more than tactical, it is symbolic. The Fremen see him as Muad'Dib, a figure who embodies both survival and destiny. Their loyalty and faith amplify his influence, making him not just a military commander but a spiritual figure. Yet Paul struggles with the burden of this duality. He fears that the fervent devotion of his people could spiral into the catastrophic futures he has foreseen, galactic-scale wars carried out in his name. Amid these preparations, Feyd-Rautha devises a personal plan to eliminate Paul. He knows that if he can remove the leader of the Fremen, the rebellion will collapse. Feyd-Rautha's cunning and ruthlessness make him a formidable adversary. He sets traps, manipulates alliances, and prepares an ambush that could turn the tide of the war in his favor. But Paul's visions guide him. He anticipates the enemy's moves and counters with precision. Using the desert itself as a weapon, he orchestrates a series of attacks that leave the Harkonnens disoriented and on the defensive. Every raid strengthens Fremen unity and morale, proving that strategy combined with belief is more powerful than brute force alone. The tension builds to a breaking point. Both sides prepare for a confrontation that will determine not just control of Arrakis, but the future of the spice, the Fremen, and the galaxy itself. Every leader, every soldier, and every decision matters. The desert has become the ultimate battlefield, and Paul stands at the center, balancing vision, strategy, and prophecy in a war where the stakes are cosmic. The stage is set for the ultimate confrontation on Arrakis. Under the leadership of Paul Atreides, the united Fremen tribes are now ready to face their most dangerous enemies yet, the Harkonnens, led by the cunning Feyd-Rautha Harkonnen, and the Emperor of the Galaxy himself. This is no longer a battle for survival, it is a war to decide the fate of the entire universe. Paul's visions guide every move of the Fremen army. Each attack, each ambush, each strategic decision is calculated based on countless possible outcomes he has seen in his mind. Riding massive sandworms across the desert, the Fremen strike fear into the hearts of their enemies. They are no longer a scattered resistance, they are an unstoppable force. The Harkonnens, however, are not easily defeated. Feyd-Rautha studies the Fremen attacks carefully, adjusting his strategies and reinforcing the most vulnerable spice operations. He knows that the survival of his family and the control of Arrakis depends on crushing Paul's rebellion. Meanwhile, Paul's personal relationships continue to shape his decisions. Chani, who has been at his side through every battle, remains his most trusted confidant. She reminds him that even with overwhelming power, the human cost of war must never be forgotten. Every plan must balance strategy with morality, an idea many of the free men do not consider in their growing fervor. The first massive clash occurs near a key spice production facility. Thousands of Fremen descend from the dunes, riding on the backs of gigantic sandworms, surprising the Harkonnen forces. The battle is intense. Explosions shake the desert, machines are destroyed, and soldiers are captured. Paul's presence inspires his warriors, and their combined strength begins to overwhelm the enemy. But this victory comes at a cost. Despite careful planning, Fremen warriors are lost in the chaos. Paul watches the deaths of those who have fought beside him, understanding that even in victory there is sacrifice. His visions warn him that the greatest challenges are yet to come. As the news of the Fremen victory spreads, the Emperor decides that direct intervention is necessary. He dispatches elite Sardaukar troops, an elite military force feared throughout the galaxy, to Arrakis. Their arrival escalates the war, forcing Paul to confront not just the Harkonnens, but the full might of imperial power. Every decision becomes critical. One misstep could destroy everything he has worked to build. Paul's leadership now becomes more than tactical, it is symbolic. The Fremen see him as Muad'Dib, a figure who embodies both survival and destiny. Their loyalty and faith amplify his influence, making him not just a military commander but a spiritual figure. Yet Paul struggles with the burden of this duality. He fears that the fervent devotion of his people could spiral into the catastrophic futures he has foreseen, galactic scale wars carried out in his name. Amid these preparations, Feyd-Rautha devises a personal plan to eliminate Paul. He knows that if he can remove the leader of the Fremen, the rebellion will collapse. Feyd-Rautha's cunning and ruthlessness make him a formidable adversary. He sets traps, manipulates alliances, and prepares an ambush that could turn the tide of the war in his favor. But Paul's visions guide him. He anticipates the enemy's moves and counters with precision. Using the desert itself as a weapon, he orchestrates a series of attacks that leave the Harkonnens disoriented and on the defensive. Every raid strengthens Fremen unity and morale, proving that strategy combined with belief is more powerful than brute force alone. The tension builds to a breaking point. Both sides prepare for a confrontation that will determine not just control of Arrakis, but the future of the spice, the Fremen, and the galaxy itself. Every leader, every soldier, and every decision matters. The desert has become the ultimate battlefield, and Paul stands at the center, balancing vision, strategy, and prophecy in a war where the stakes are cosmic.